Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for another installment of the Prestige series of COVID-19 webinars. Today, or I should say, my name is Jason Flynn. I'm the Director of Client Services and Human Resources for Prestige Employee Administrators. Carol Sawyer, our tax manager, is back with us again this week after a quick respite last week. So it's nice to have Carol back with us. It's also a pleasure to have with us this morning Philip Bachnein. Philip is with the Fisher Phillips Law Firm, whose practice has a focus on employment, business and labor issues with an emphasis on OSHA, joint employment, franchise, and workplace safety matters. His expertise in diversity and inclusion practices is really a great fit and a great resource for everything that we're dealing with in today's society and a lot of what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. And as we move forward. So we're very excited to have Philip join us this morning to discuss diversity and inclusion considerations for today's workforce. Then after Philip speaks, Carol will wrap things up with a brief update on the Paycheck Protection Program. And again, Carol, it's nice to have you back with us this week. As a reminder, all participants will be muted throughout the webinar. However, if you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature through the webinar and direct the question to the panelists. We'll do our best to answer all the questions that you have coming into us. If we can't get to anything, we will reach out to you separately with an answer. Also, a copy of the presentation and the slide deck will be available in the COVID Resource Center of the Prestige website following the webinar. So at this point right now, I am very happy to introduce Philip Bachnein. And Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. One, thanks to everyone for taking time out of their day to join and listen to this presentation. And also thank you for that very, very flattering introduction. And my hope is that I satisfy and exceed everyone's expectations on the information I'm able to provide today. So today we're going to be talking about, as Jason mentioned, diversity and inclusion considerations for today's workforce. Diversity and inclusion has always been an issue that I've been interested in, that I provided guidance on, but over the last several months, it's become more heightened and more important than ever, just given the events that are happening in our society. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of give my definitions of what diversity and inclusion mean. Oftentimes, because there's an and, people think that they are one and the same, that it's diversity and inclusion. It's one thing. And while they often go together, there is a difference. So we're going to talk about diversity and the benefits that diversity provides to the workforce and the challenges that diversity has, but also we're going to talk about inclusion and the challenges that arise in trying to create an inclusive workforce. And in order to do that, I think that having a framework of what the definitions are and how they relate, but how they're different and how they kind of build each other is really important. So diversity, to me, and Jason, we go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, you can go back one. You already started. That's cool. Yeah, just go back to the first one. I'm sorry. Right. So diversity is the different types and the different qualities of that individuals in your workforce have. So you have diversity based on race, you have it on color, religion, creed, sex, familial status, social economic status, marital status, ethnicity, all of these different statuses that employees can bring to an environment, help to diversify the employee population. And so that's diversity, but inclusion is something that's a little deeper, that's a little bit more robust. And inclusion deals with the concept of, okay, I have all of these employees or individuals with varying backgrounds, varying experiences, and we'll talk about varying biases, various ways of viewing the world. How do I make all of these individuals, all these employees with their various backgrounds, how do I create an environment and foster an environment that's inclusive to all of these different and varying employees with these different backgrounds, to make them feel valued in the workplace, to make them feel as if their opinions, their experiences matter? And how do I create an environment where that experience and that feeling is uniform throughout the environment, because in any situation, work, life, quite honestly, you're going to have situations where there's going to be one group of people where there's more people who look or are from that background, and then you have a minority of whatever population you have that has different experiences. So while the majority may always feel included based off that, sharing similar backgrounds, race, economic status, age, gender, whatever the case may be, it's about making an environment where the group of individuals who may be in the minority, who may not come from that or fit that general definition of the workforce or the environment. What do you do to make sure that everyone feels included? And that's a hard challenge, and it's become more increasingly difficult as workforces begin to become diverse. And I heard a great quote, and I think it's fitting, is that diversity just on its own is counting people, right? It's counting people. We have this many people of this, we have this many people of that. But inclusion takes a step further, and it's making the people count. So I think that's kind of, a quick takeaway in terms of how you can the differences that exist. And again, there's benefits to diversity, but there's more robust benefits to inclusion. But we're going to first talk about diversity and what that means, and some of the challenges that even present themselves with a diverse workforce. You can go to the next slide. Right. So why do we value diversity? The reason we value diversity is that creating a workplace culture, you want to create a workplace culture based on fair treatment, but there's tangible benefits when an organization is comprised of employees who candidly want to work together and able to achieve their best results. When you have employees that can value diversity, it just creates a much more robust and advantageous workforce. There's a positive dynamic that results when in a positive energy that results when people want to work together, and it can help to make the organization thrive. When we talk about, again, the reason why you want to value diversity is because it's the right thing to do. But in addition to that, there's also what they call a business case for diversity, and because there's been studies that when you have a diverse workforce, it helps improve the performance, and it helps you obtain a competitive advantage. It increases employee morale and generates a more positive culture. But I think it's really important too that it helps to give organizations access to a broader range of opinions and viewpoints. You have to remember, a lot of your clients, their employees come from, you have some clients that are, your 10-person shop. You have your employees, your clients that will have 100 employees, and their customer bases are different. And their customer bases, depending on the client, they may not all be a one-stop shop, and it may not be just one type of client or customer that uses your client's services and products. So when you're marketing, you're trying to come up with solutions to problems. When you're speaking to higher ups within the company, being able to present viewpoints and strategies that can address a myriad of issues and a myriad of viewpoints helps to broaden the analysis you can give in the services that your clients' employees will be able to provide. And again, diversity can also help to avoid potential legal issues. But I think just there's so much value in terms of being able to collaborate and look at challenges and solve problems from not having a myopic point of view, and being able to take a much bigger scheme and picture in terms of how you're going to solve problems. So there's just, in addition, again, to being the right thing to do, there are competitive and business advantages to having a diverse workforce. Next slide. So the challenge then becomes, when you have a diverse workforce, there's so many benefits, but there's also challenges with that diverse workforce. And one of the challenges that presents itself results from the concept of implicit bias, right? Now, implicit bias is a positive or negative mental attitude towards a person, thing, or group that a person holds at an unconscious level. And then you combine that with the concept of a schema, which is a mental shortcut, which is automatic to help and categorize information, right? So when you have an implicit bias, essentially what it means is that implicit bias is a lens which automatically filters how we take in and act on information. And the lens is always present. Now, when you have a mental shortcut, and that's, you've created a mental shortcut through which you view things, that can be positive if, to help the brain process more information, to move quicker. So, if I am looking, as a child, you learn that a shape that has 4 sides is a square. So now every time you see a shape that has 4 sides, it's a square. But then you learn it could be a diamond or a rectangle. But you've learned that, okay, well, if I see something with 4 sides, I don't have to analyze what it is every time, because I've created a shortcut that these type of things go in this category. And so while that can be helpful with, learning how to tie your shoes or learning shapes, things of that nature, they don't just apply to tools to help you function in life. They apply to experiences and people. Next slide. And as I mentioned, right, everyone has schemas and implicit bias, and it's a as it says here, it's a preference. It can be a preference for a group, and that preference can be positive or negative, and it's often operating outside of our awareness. So this is not an explicit bias where, for example, you may say, "Listen, I don't like cheeseburgers," or I don't like this, I don't like that. These could be these could be kind of internal subconscious biases and attitudes that you have just based on experience, based on things that you learn from your parents, things that you learn from your environment. But again, they're not just related to procedures that we learn to make life easier. They can be based on stereotypes and attitudes we hold. They tend to develop early in life, and they tend to strengthen over time. So, and again, like as I said earlier, but I think it's important to reiterate that your biases, your implicit biases, can differ substantially from stereotypes and attitudes we expressly report. So, for example, you'll see plenty of, you could have an example where someone, says, listen, and you may have people, you or your clients may experience this, where you're doing an investigation because there was a complaint of discriminatory conduct or improper statements, right, based on race or gender. And let's just use race as an example here. You're conducting an investigation, or you're managing an investigation for one of your clients. And the employee at issue says, listen, is reports have said something racially offensive or derogatory. And they may not even realize it, and it could be based on an implicit bias, because when you talk to that person, they say, what? No, me, I would never say that. And they'll run you a list of all the reasons why they don't think that they could ever be viewed as a discriminatory person. They don't think they could ever be viewed as a racist person, or that they could ever have engaged in harassing conduct, because that's not the type of person they are. And they'll give you this long laundry list of reasons why that could never be them, because this is how they view the world. But that's how they view the world explicitly. That's how they report. But it's not factoring in or taking into consideration the biases they may have, which shape even how they say things or how they view things. So understanding implicit biases can be a very useful tool, even when managing employee issues and managing complaints and things of that nature, because an employee would self-report as, I'm this or that, and all these things are not discriminatory, and they could never be viewed in that way, or they don't view themselves in that way. The actions and the way the conduct occurred could have a very different result. And I just want to talk a little bit about schemas in more detail. So next slide, please. So schemas are non-conscious expectations or stereotypes, and they're associated with members of a group that guide perceptions and behavior. Now, again, because these are shortcuts, the actions that you take based on your schemas, they're inevitable. But again, if you have schemas based on stereotypes about a specific culture, a specific race, a specific age, and we're going to talk about them in more detail, but they could result in poor judgment, especially in the workplace. And again, people aren't typically aware of them. but you can be with time and practice and kind of focusing on them over time. Next slide. So, and we've talked about it, implicit bias can be based on race, gender, ethnicity, sexual identity, your socioeconomic status, your age, and any of a variety of other ways which a person sorts and categorizes things. And they can come from your parents, they can come from your family, they can come from your peers, they can come from school. One of the biggest ways that implicit biases develop, quite honestly, is from your parents, is from your families, and also from the media. It's what you see on TV every day. It's the way that images are portrayed to you. So, you have so many examples where if you look on the news, if there is a African American who's alleged of doing something, oftentimes they'll post or put up a picture of this menacing looking character. They'll try and find they'll post for some reason the worst picture of this individual, even though this person could be a college graduate. If you even look at the example I saw not too long ago, when there was that situation where a woman in Central Park reported called a man to the police and said that she was harassing him when they were watching birds. The initial picture that some news outlets posted of this man, even though he went, to Ivy League school and was a bird watcher and all these things, was not his best picture. It was just some, it was just some random picture. And then later on, as more information came out, then it was like, oh, he goes to Harvard, he does all these things. But the first picture that the media put out was a picture of an African American individual that kind of narrated and supported implicit biases of being menacing or dangerous or things of that nature. And that happens so often in the media. So that is one of the strongest ways. And again, I'm just using this as an example that implicit biases can be shaped. Next slide. And so discussing, and so the challenge now becomes, now that the first step is to understand implicit biases and where they come from. But it's also critical to understand how these biases can cause challenges in the workplace. And that's what I really want to talk about for, going forward in the presentation is, okay, thanks, Phil. I understand you've told me, this is the definition, here's how it can happen, but how does this impact, the management of the workplace on a day-to-day basis? And the reality is that it impacts it very significantly in ways that people are not even aware of. And one of the main ways that it does it, there can be a negative impact is through microaggressions. And microaggressions are everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, insults, and they can be intentional or unintentional, but they communicate a hostile or derogatory or negative message to target groups of people based solely on their marginalized group membership. So I'll give an example of that's happened to me in the workplace, right? So not in my current workplace, but just over the course of working, I'll be standing next to, I'm 6'4", okay? I'm 6'4", and I'll be standing next to another tall employee. And this tall employee could be Caucasian. And someone will come up to both of us and they'll look at me only and say, oh, you used to play basketball, right? And there's nothing, they're basing it partially on the fact that I'm tall, but they're also basing it partially on the fact that I'm an African American, because they'll look at my other colleague who's tall, lean just like me, and that comment doesn't come up, right? So that's an example of it, where it's, well, the implicit bias is that African Americans play basketball. That's what they do, and so you must have played basketball, and it's an accomplishment that you now are a lawyer and not playing basketball, and that's an example of a microaggression. And another example could be if there's, again, this has happened to me in my experience over the course of my career, where there may be only a small amount of African Americans working at a job force, and they'll confuse you with another African American male, and they'll continue to confuse you even when you correct them. And they won't take the time to get to know who you are, simply under the concept, it's well, what's the difference? And that can really decrease morale over time, when that same concept that doesn't continue to happen to other peers in the workforce. There could be implicit biases where examples could be, okay, so oftentimes people tend to gravitate to people who look like them, who have the same experiences as them. But when you're dealing with work assignments, that could be detrimental, because if you have a partner or a supervisor who always gives out the best and choice assignments to people that they automatically connect with, they may not even realize they're doing it. But over time, it could create a situation where one group of employees continues to receive choice assignments, and another group continues to get left with menial work and does not develop and grow. And then what happens over time is now you've fostered one group of employees, and you've actually stunted the growth of another group of employees. And again, that decreases morale, that decreases inclusion. That does not create a feeling that this is a workforce where everyone is valued, everyone has opportunities to grow and develop. Other examples of microaggressions that will often come across are, denying the experiences of employees, but only certain groups of employees, by questioning the credibility and validity of their stories, continuing to misuse pronouns even after an employee, transgender or not, indicates that they prefer a gender pronoun, or even anticipating employees' emotional responses based on a gender, sexual orientation, or race. So, for example, an implicit bias that often happens is that we often see as a gender bias, that women are supposed to be, caring and nurturing, and that could have developed as a child, right? So you're looking for a maternal figure, a mother, and so caring and nurturing, that's great there, but as you go through your life and as you grow, and now you are in the workforce, having those same biases about the way women are supposed to act could impact the way that a manager could respond to a female employee who values the work that she performs and wants to succeed and could be vocal about that, and then she may be labeled in a negative way, whereas opposed to a male who is forceful in demanding certain demanding that they be treated in a certain way, or demanding that they receive certain assignments. They're viewed as a leader and aggressive, but that same connotation wouldn't necessarily apply to women. And that's based on the concept of implicit bias or microaggressions, based on that's how you've categorized men and women in life, and it's carried over into the workplace, but it has a negative impact, again, on inclusion and making employees feel valued, because there's one set of expectations for men and a different set of expectations for women. Another example of a microaggression could be, again, because people just implicitly favor oftentimes talking and being around people who have the same experiences and background as them, is that you could have a manager who only talks to employees or associates that look like them. So in their free time, you see them walking in the hall, and every time you see this manager and the supervisor, he's talking to this group of associates and asking them about their weekend, and asking them about how their families are doing, and asking them about what their plans are for, and hobbies and things of that nature. But they'll do that. They'll see you who's not part of that group, and you'll say, okay, well, the manager's going to come talk to me. I'm ready to tell him about my family and my life. And then, he'll finish that conversation with those employees and turn around and go into his office. And over time, that can create a disheartening and debilitating effect on those employees who constantly see that they're being seen real life examples of a workplace where the management, the supervisors, don't really care about them as people, or and if you ask that supervisor, they may say, oh no, I like everybody. It never even crossed my mind to talk to that person about their family and their life. Because why? Because we don't have anything in common. We wouldn't, I don't think we would like the same things. But not taking that step to engage other employees who don't look like you, who don't come from that background, again, can have a devastating effect on morale, on your retention rates. Because what happens with inclusion is if you don't make an effort to include everyone, the employees that you don't include are going to leave. They're going to leave. And then what happens is you lose out on top talent. Your employees could lose out on top talent. Your clients, I should say, could lose out on top talent. To your competitors, because the companies and the brands that value inclusion, they get top diverse talent, and that's something that a lot of companies want. And if you don't make an inclusive effort, and if you don't have a history of supporting diversity and inclusion, and making those efforts, then you're going to lose the top talent. And a lot of companies often struggle with this. And that's there's two challenges. One is getting diverse talent in the door, but the bigger challenge is retaining that diverse talent. And as we'll talk about more, simply kind of doing boilerplate, activities, having a diversity committee where no one gets to actually have a say or have any power in the changes of how the company is going to operate. Having kind of these random parties to celebrate, diverse holidays. And while that's good, but if that's all there is, the risk of not being able to create an actual genuine environment of inclusivity runs the risk of losing that talent. And next slide. And so a subset of microaggressions is micromessaging. And so micromessaging is, as you see here, small messaging sent without conscious thought or intent. They can be microaffirmations, they can be micro inequities or microaggressions. So micromessaging can be good, it could be bad, or I should say it can be positive and negative. And the best way to think of micromessaging is that it's the environment that you create. So, for example, if you have an instance where you have the supervisor instance where it becomes well known in your company that these three supervisors, three partners, they only will deal with Caucasian associates, or they only deal with Caucasian attorneys, and they won't make any effort to engage other members of their workforce. And when this becomes known and nothing is done to remedy or rectify that sends a message to the employees working for that company that you don't really matter. Yeah, we know about it, but this supervisor does a really good job, or this partner brings in a ton of business, whatever the case may be. And so we value the economics more than trying to establish inclusivity. And that's a message that gets sent. And the longer that those type of behaviors are permitted to remain unchallenged and without being rectified, that message just gets stronger and stronger. So you could have a company that has a diversity committee and has various celebrations for different holidays of people's cultures, but the actual events on the day-to-day that occur in the workforce, if those type of events aren't addressed to change the lack of inclusiveness, well, then the message really is still, this company really doesn't care about anyone who is not Caucasian or whatever the majority and dominating group could be at that company. Other examples that I see that I've seen in real life are you could be at a meeting and where an employee from, let's say, the majority group makes a statement in the meeting. So let's say it's a Caucasian male, and he makes a statement in a meeting, and everyone's responsive to the message, and they're, oh, this is a great idea, that's wonderful, and then an employee of color, or let's say a female shares an idea, and all of a sudden it's just crickets, no one responds. Well, over time that could send a message, and again, maybe that first time the statement wasn't a good one, or the idea wasn't that great, but at some point, if that continues to be a pattern, well, then you send a message that there's inequities in how the management of this company values its workers, and some workers are viewed as more valuable than others. A big one that I see in that a lot of companies just don't even think about is their office decor. Think about the pictures on the wall in the company that you're at. If you have a diverse workforce, and every picture in your office is of somebody from the 1770s, white hair, sitting on a horse. If you have a diverse workforce, think about what message that can send. If there's women there, if there's African Americans, if there's Hispanics, if there Asians, and all the pictures on the walls are of 45, 50-year-old white men from the 1700s. that it sends a message that, you know, the history and the experiences of the other remainders of our workforce just don't carry the same weight to our institution. And again, over time, that has a negative impact on morale and production and on retention of top quality and talented candidates of all levels of diversity. So those are just some examples, and we could, you know, I could give you probably another 50 if I wanted to, but you know, those are just some examples that I see quite often, and I suspect your clients see too. And one of the things that I've seen more often when I go into offices now, especially when you're looking at employers who are taking concerted and you know, measurable steps to create a diverse and inclusive workforce, is you know, art. There's different types of art or pictures or paintings that are kind of just nice art, you know, and it's not about any particular history or background, and it creates a nice decor, but it also doesn't send a message about which group of your employees and their history is valued more than another group. Next slide. So now that we're talking about implicit bias and how it can impact the workplace and impact inclusion, what do we do about that, right? What do we do? You know, I would never want to give a presentation and tell you about all the challenges and the bad things and not provide material that can be used to try and fix it, to try and help rectify or try and make progress to changing these circumstances which exist. And the way that you do it is through a concept called debiasing. And debiasing is trying to essentially correct and try and work to you know, make changes that result from implicit bias. And it's kind of a three-step method to do that. It's education, exposure, and approach. And so we are doing the first step right now. Education is becoming aware of implicit bias. So you want to become aware of individual perceptions and stereotypes and their impact on decision making. You know, you employees and through their employers, and you can set up programs to do this. You want to work to increase your empathy. You want to have and develop the ability to understand another person's perspective and their emotions. Because if you can't understand one, why inclusion matters, or why employees would want to feel included in the place that they go to work every day for, you know, 9 to 10 to 11 to 12 hours, it's very hard to then take the next step to see what can be done. Because you have to remember, you know, a lot of people spend more time at home than they do with their families. You know, you work 8 to 12 hours a day. You drive there. You're looking at, you know, 10 to 12 hours gone. You factor in sleep. You don't have that much time with your family. So if you're going to be at a place of employment longer than you're with your family on a daily basis, you know, you as an employee, you would hope that it's a place that values you. And as an employer, if you want to keep your employees productive, not just happy, but productive and retained and doing good work and contributing on a substantive basis, you want to take steps to make sure that those employees feel valued. And in order to do that, in order to value employees and make them feel valued, you have to take the first step in educating yourself about the biases that exist and educating yourself on their perspectives. Because if you don't understand, or you're not taking steps to understand, again, you're never going to understand 100%. That's not the expectation. But taking steps to just see a different perspective and point of view, it makes it much harder to create a connection that can allow a diverse workforce to feel included and want to contribute substantively and productively for long periods of time. The next part of it is exposure. You want to connect with people from groups that are different from your own. If you continue to kind of stay in your pod, or you just have a very homogenous workforce and there's no efforts taken to increase diversity or to increase interactions to groups of people that are different than your own group, it's going to be a lot harder to defeat implicit biases. But just because you get implicit biases from so many places and over a long period of time, they don't just go away on their own. You have to educate, but then you have to have positive experiences, and they're easy to have, just by connecting with other groups of people and just working together and growing together. You're going to develop positive experiences. You're going to develop a rapport, and that can help kind of help to further along the debiasing concept. There's research that cross-group friendships have been shown in several studies to decrease stress in interactive group situations, because now there's not a fear like, oh my goodness, I'm the only one of this in this group, I'm the only one of that in this group, that person's the only one of this. I don't know how to talk to that particular person. The more experience, the more repetitions you have being in environments like that, the less stress and discomfort there is, in being inside of those situations, both in work and in life. A big thing you could do from an exposure perspective is to just, again, empathy and trying to think and get to understand that person's perspective, because when you can engage in perspective taking, it helps to suspend negative judgments. You can focus on their differences among people and families that make me uncomfortable. If employees are put in situations where they can engage in those type of exercises, engage in those type of experiences, it allows employees to then deal and address their biases, and to then move forward in a positive way. And there's tools, there's materials, there's training that employers can use to provide these experiences and these materials, these tools to their employees to then help create and foster a more inclusive environment in the workforce. And then the third part is really your approach. We're going to talk about it in more detail later on, but you want to examine as an employer, and for Prestige, right? You're going to have clients who come to you with these issues and things that that they're going to need to focus on. Okay, well, you're going to need to examine your policies. You're going to need to examine your procedures. You're going to need to examine your programs and essentially kind of do an audit to see where there are gaps or where there are holes in the diversity and inclusion efforts that your company is making, and doing that and going through that process is really the first step in kind of changing the policies and procedures. You have to know where the issues are, where the holes are, and that's going to result in organizational changes. And again, you're going to have accountability. We can talk about that and more, but that could be developing measurable and trackable ways to keep track of the status and to keep track of what the organization said that they were going to do. And again, we can talk about it more, but that's the approach concept. Next slide. Some questions that we get just from an employment perspective is you'll have clients who come up and ask questions about diversity and inclusion. I'll say, okay, well, listen, we have a handbook. We have our anti-discrimination policy. We have an EEO policy. We have anti-harassment. We're good, right? We're good. We're good to go. And the answer is you're not. Those are helpful things, but equal opportunity, anti-discrimination, those efforts are good, but they are different than diversity and inclusion efforts. Your EEO policies, your anti-discrimination, your anti-harassment, those help to create an inclusive workforce, but those policies are meant to establish policies and rules to govern and regulate the conduct of your employees. Diversity and inclusion efforts are different in the fact that the purpose of those efforts is to create an environment where those employees feel included and valuable in the workplace. It's not necessarily just to prevent them from being discriminated and harassed against. And a lot of employers try and lump them together. All right, well, listen, we got a handbook. We're good to go here. And as I'm going to talk about in terms of what things that can be done and steps that can be taken by employers to really deep dive into what can be done to really enhance your diversity and inclusion efforts, you'll see that it's a lot more than a handbook. You still need those policies. You still need your EEO policy and your anti-discrimination policy and your anti-harassment policy, but that's really the tip of the iceberg from a diversity and inclusion perspective. Next slide. So one question that a lot of employers also have is, okay, well, I heard what you said, Phil, And, our workforce is not diverse. It's very homogenous. We want to change that. So we want to start recruiting, more diverse employees. What's our exposure here? What can we do that? Can we just decide that we want to recruit diverse candidates? Can we hire them just based solely off their diversity? How does this work? And that's, and the answer to that is that, listen, you can always have recruiting activities that are targeting diverse communities. You can always have efforts to increase diversity and make that a larger focus of your recruitment. You want to hire the best candidates. So, you don't want, if there's someone that's of a diverse nature, hiring them solely for that is not recommended. But, there's plenty of top-notch candidates out there that are diverse and can meet your goals. So it's really about finding ways to, get in contact with and establish connections that can develop a pipeline. So the top-notch, top-quality candidates who are diverse can kind of make it into, make it onto the desk, and those resumes can get there. And so there's tons of ways to do that. One of the challenges I always hear from employers is that, listen, we send our stuff out, we put a resume on Indeed.com, or Monster.com, or we use the referrals that from the same referral places that we've always get, and we never get in a diverse employees. Well, okay, if you keep doing, my response is, if you keep engaging in the same concept, you're going to keep getting the same results. That doesn't mean that the opportunities aren't out there. It's just that you're doing the same things that got you the same results for the last 20 years. Of course you're going to get the same results. You need to expand and maybe modify your approach. So that could mean developing or relationships with diverse groups can put you in contact with potential talent that refers diverse talent. Sponsoring diverse organizations, developing relationships with entities and groups that can provide you the talent that you're looking for. So it could take a little bit more work than, I just always use this one company and that's who they refer me. Well, if you're not pleased with their results, then maybe you need to go somewhere else. So there's many things that can be done, and you can always put a focus on trying to increase the diverse talent within your workplace. You can always put a focus on that. Is focusing on diverse talent. Next topic. Next slide, I should say. Okay, great. So, what I also want to talk about is, just some tips for operating in the real world, right? I've told you about implicit bias, the concepts behind it. I've told you about diversity and inclusion. The recruiting was a tip already, but just some tips for operating in the real world. And my rule number one is if you're talking to your clients or you're talking to management in terms of how are we going to foster a more inclusive environment? How are we actually going to make this happen? How are we going to be sincere? And the answer is that you want to just actually be sincere, and authenticity always prepares. Talk is never enough. You're going to have to take action. But a statement is not a bad start, but it needs to be, if you're going to put out a PR statement, have a statement that has specific action and measurable goals. During the current Black Lives Matter, with all the protests, there were so many companies and organizations that put out statements about, we condemn racism, and we support the Black Lives Matter protests. And those were great statements. Those were very nice statements. But you could see dialogue about, okay, well, so many companies are just putting out these cookie cutter statements saying Black Lives Matter. What action is your company going to actually take to address racism, or to address discrimination, or to increase inclusion in your workforce? What are you actually going to do? Are you just simply giving a statement because that's what all other your competitors are doing, and you don't want to lose out on the client base, so you're just doing that? It sounds nice, and then you're going to move on. What are you actually going to do? So if you're going to craft a PR statement to that effect, you actually want to have some actual measurable goals there. And whether it's verbally or in writing, whether it's you're giving a a statement, in an interview, or you're again, doing a written statement. You want it to be authentic, and it's okay to acknowledge shortcomings. It's okay to acknowledge your shortcomings, and again, you don't have to. You can do those in your meetings when you're evaluating what needs to be done. But yeah, I think it's very important that if you're going to make changes, you want to be accountable. You want to be accountable for the shortcomings, and that's not always easy. It's not always easy to kind of audit your company or audit the practices, especially if you were involved in developing the practices or managing the day-to-day actions of your company, and recognizing that there's issues and that there's shortcomings, and that you're going to be in charge for providing guidance or advice to your executives, or even to your clients on what needs to be done. But that is really important. If you don't know what the shortcomings are, it's much harder to take direct concerted action to try and grow in those areas. So next slide. So rule number 2 is you have to take meaningful action. There's a limitless number of options here, but some of the bigger ones that either you would may want to do for your company, or if you are giving counsel to your clients who have their own issues, is that you want to make sure that company's diversity and inclusion efforts are assessed candidly and critically. You want to identify areas of self-concern. So you're going to want to see, did you have any past goals related to diversity and inclusion? What are they? How far along are we on those? You want to look at the diversity of your clients and staff and management. You want to see if you have any current diversity initiatives. You want to see what the level of representation of diversity is at all levels of that organization. You want to look to see if there's any glaring pay disparities between diverse and non-diverse talent. And that can be, African American, Caucasian. That can be men, women. There's so many different levels that you could look into. But you want to see if there's any glaring pay disparities or discrepancies. You're going to want to evaluate your company's policies and practices. You're going to want to evaluate the staff training. Hey, are we giving training on diversity and inclusion? Are we giving even our training on harassment and discrimination? What trainings are we giving? What information are we providing to our employees to make meaningful progress here? Are we providing mentoring and sponsorship of diverse employees? Do we have any mandatory diversity and inclusion training? Are we integrating diversity and inclusion strategies into our leadership assessment and performance management and recruitment and training initiatives? Are we developing measurable and trackable goals? Are we putting timelines on those goals or deadlines on those goals to, for example, to increase hiring, to increase advancement of diverse employees at all stages within the company? And this includes management. Is there a plan and development to reach those goals? Are you working with recruiters to develop pipelines to employ diverse talent? And are you engaging again in educational outreach to inform employees about the value of diversity, what inclusion is, how implicit bias can impact the day-to-day operations of the workforce, and the promotion and advancement of diverse candidates. So again, there's so many options, but these are some of the main ones that I thought about and want to discuss. And the takeaway is that you have to take meaningful action. It can't just be token efforts just to say that we're doing something. You actually have to do something. It's not a check the box exercise. Say, all right, we did this, check. Look at all the things that we've done, and then go back to conducting your daily lives where diverse employees could be marginalized and things of that nature, and not really given opportunities to grow in advance. So that's the real takeaway, is that if you're going to do it, you have to mean it when you take this action. So I think my time is up, and I appreciate you taking some time to just listen to me and talk with me, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Philip, thank you very much. Philip and the Fisher Phillips law firm is really a great partner of Prestige. We work with them closely. They help ourselves, Prestige, our clients, with many different areas. You know, right now, obviously, diversity and inclusion specifically. And this is something that Prestige is focusing on in large part. You know, we did before, we're continuing to do it now, and to you know, move along with the changes in everything that Philip has described. But it is very important on a whole. And Philip, we thank your participation and the professionalism that you bring to the webinars, and look forward to including you again in the future. At this point, I know that Carol is extremely looking forward to getting in here and saying a few words on some updates regarding or around the Paycheck Protection Program. So, Carol, the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you very much, Jason, and it's nice to be back. I've not been a part of the last couple of them. The update is pretty short, which is why it wasn't necessarily included in our description of this webinar. It's first of all to let you all know there is no rush to apply for forgiveness. In the beginning, when we were applying to get the actual loan, there was a rush because we were all worried about money running out. And for those of you listening who haven't yet applied, there is still money left. And I believe the new application date is August 8th. And the reason there is no rush to apply for forgiveness is banks have not yet received the guidance on how to even process these applications. They're hoping, the bank that we spoke to, that the SBA will release this guidance in August. You know how we've all been waiting on SBA to release things. August could mean August 29th. So all I can say is please be patient. I know you all want to, you know, finalize all of this and put it away, but it's going to take some time. So stay tuned. You know that we here at Prestige are not done with it yet. We're diligently working on the reports. You will need to either fill out the full application or the easy application that we told you about when it came out. And when that is done, we will have a webinar to show you snapshots of what the reports will look like, where the numbers go on the application, a reminder of who can use the easy application as opposed to the larger and much longer application. So we are here for you. It just is going to take a little bit of time before you're all going to be able to put pen to paper and complete your application. So just be patient. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, I agree. For those of you listening, what you don't know is that we have plenty of information that we have on the docket here to release out to everybody. Naturally, as Carol was talking about, there are things that we need to wait on, guidance from Capitol Hill and legislative updates, which are going to affect a lot of things. But as we wait for those, we are working on a lot of different things for our clients to use from a reporting perspective, a compliance perspective, and that's why it's always important that we're able to highlight these things on these calls in our client communications, which again we meet about multiple times a week to put together the information necessary for you as business owners and executives and management to be able to utilize that and share with your employees and use within your organizations. So thank you again to everybody for spending some time with us this morning on our webinar. We really do appreciate you sitting in. As a reminder, today's presentation will be on the COVID-19 Resource Center within the Prestige website for you to download. We'll also have a recording of this webinar, as we do with all of our webinars, so you can always go back and look upon fondly these webinars and everything that we talked about, or if you just would like a refresher, they are there at your disposal. You can also tune into our HR in 15 podcasts, which we have quite a few up there now, as well as looking out for our communications. So once again, thank you everybody for spending some time with us. Be on the lookout for an invitation for next week's webinar, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week.